Okay. Okay, no problem. Thank you. So as of right now,
Good afternoon, everyone. We will call to order the August regular meeting of the Cobb County Board of Elections and Registration. Call it to order at 3:03 p.m. Everyone on the board should have received a copy of the agenda. We'll entertain any motions as may be necessary to amend the agenda. Hearing none, I'll accept a motion to approve the agenda as prepared.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bruning. Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the agenda as provided. All those in favor? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is our public comment. I do note the number of individuals that have signed up to provide public comment here in person. I believe we have 2 that will be providing public comment virtually. I know that one was attempting to get on the WebEx, and I'm going to guess that she is not on as of yet. So as opposed to what we generally do, we take our virtual public comment and then we go to those that are here in the room. We are going to start with those that are here in the room first. Noting the number of individuals, we will have 3 minutes to address the board. Starting with Miss Virginia Coates. And Ms. Coates, when you start, if you will state your name and any organization that you are affiliated with, that would be helpful for me.
My name is Virginia Choate.
Oh, I apologize, Choate.
Choate. I have lived in Cobb County for 41 years. In this instance, I guess I would say that I'd be affiliated with the Cobb GOP because I'm talking about poll watching. I am here to speak about the runoff election in 2022. I was a poll watcher on November 26, 2022. I had done poll watching that year, 2 other locations, primary and election day. On this day, I was at the East Cobb Government Center. At 2 p.m., 110 people were inside and 120 people were outside. The ADA number 2 screen was not showing the number of ballots. It was not visible. I reported this to the poll managers. They said they would fix it. It was still the same at closeout. Also, the ADA number 2 screen was too high. This, of course, is for disabled people. There was only 3 steps, heel to heel, at number 1, quad to the ADA, ADA to duplex number 2, and duplex to duplex. The poll manager table was very long. It did not have to be that long, which might have helped put distance between the voting stations. Remember, when someone is voting, their body takes up part of this space. People were having to squeeze by to get to their stations. One voter left with their ballot and did not go through the scanner. They were not allowed to vote again, and they were not allowed to vote provisional. There were plenty of people working the departure door to keep someone from leaving with their ballot. There were other privacy violations. One about would have been clapping for first-time voters. These were young people and visibly embarrassed. I do have a copy of my drawing that I can leave with you, and I can visibly show you how, with my feet, this is. That's how much distance there was.
Thank you. I will note that most likely the balance of the people here and perhaps those that are viewing did not hear because you weren't on a mic, but thank you for providing that to us. Okay. CP, I'm in communication with Ms. Grubbs, and she's saying that did you send her the link?
I did.
Okay. She's also noting that there is no link on the website to watch the meeting.
Saying no link on the website.
I did tell her that it's on YouTube. Okay, understood. I'm just attempting to recognize all folks. Mr. Norris?
Before I start, is this an official Hugh Norris, is this an official public meeting? We didn't take the Pledge of Allegiance?
When you say, is this an official public meeting?
We didn't start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Isn't that customary for governmental meetings?
We've had this meeting, and I believe my predecessors, or our predecessors, held this meeting for years and have not, but your comment is duly noted, Mr. Norris.
Thank you kindly. Hugh Norris, a 25-year resident of Cobb County. On July 1st of 2021, the Halderman report was issued. It was a 96-page report, and at the time it was sealed by Judge Amy Totenberg, July 1st, 2021. June 14th of 2023, 2 years later, the Federal District Court for the Northern District of Georgia unsealed that report. So it became knowledgeable to most of the citizens in June 14th. Gateway Pundit, a credible alternative media source, had a report on it, and they said, big. Halderman report reveals Georgia's Dominion voting machines can be hacked, votes can be changed, elections can be altered. And at the same time, Secretary of State Raffensperger hid the report and now will not install security patches for the 2024 election, okay? Halderman, by the way, is a left-of-center assistant professor of computer engineering and computer science and engineering. But the fact he's left of center does not matter, because this is a nonpartisan issue. I attended the June 29th specially called meeting when two new board members were installed. As the Halderman report had just been released 2 weeks earlier to the general public and directly pertained to the sanctity of the votes cast by Georgians, one of the two new board members, Ms. Fisher, opined that the board should, and I'm paraphrasing, should issue some kind of a statement and acknowledge the report and indicating the board's future potential actions regarding this report. I thought that made an awful lot of sense, timely and directly related to what you all do. Well, it's now almost 2 months since that 6/29 special meeting where a board member had proactively suggested addressing the Halderman report. I see no mention of the Halderman report on the board's website. I'm not aware of any communications from the board. In today's parlance, it's crickets. I've been drawing air for over 3/4 of a century, and I have followed government actions and inactions for a very long time. In my opinion,
Mr. Norris, that's 3 minutes.
in my
It's
closing statement?
it's 3 minutes, sir. Thank you.
It's complicity. It's complicity.
Ms. Reardon?
Good afternoon. I'm speaking for myself. I'm Pamela Reardon. I don't know, I've been here in this county since '99. So many things, so little time. Where do I start? Let's start with chain of custody. Chain of custody can be better improved, and it should be consistent all the way through the state. And last session, we had House Bill 17, where we tried to fix that, and it didn't get out of committee. So we'll try doing that again. But chain of custody is key. And I say that because at the last State Board of Elections meeting, a person who works for Cobb County Registrar, there was, let's see, SB, one of these. Anyways, there was like minimum five cases, SEB, that's the State Board of Elections. But they were all from 2020, and they're from DeKalb County. They were from and caused by the person who was in charge of those areas, chain of custody, absentee ballots, etc. Grievous. And these were being sent over to the AG, okay? And so we'll see what happens. But that's happened before. My other point is, if these things had been reported on right away, which they probably were, but they were not investigated right away, because we don't have real investigators, and we haven't since 2020, we wouldn't be in this situation where Kemp would say, oh, nobody has presented anything under oath. Yes, they have. We have plenty of stuff. And yes, I'm an election denier. And yes, you can call me any names you want, but we saw it, we know it, we have the proof. But it's never been brought to a judge because the judges seem to be looking the other way. Let's just put it that way nicely. And that's why, True the Vote, Catherine, they brought it to the AG, they brought it to Mr. Kemp, they brought all the evidence, nobody would look at it. The GBI would not look at it. So it's not for the fact that nobody looked at it, nobody brought it. We brought it, everybody brought it. We have the proof. 315,000 ballots in 2020 do not have any chain of custody, do not have any paperwork. 20,799 in Fulton County alone. There is no proof that those people voted, okay? And it can be, if you want to look at it, I have it all. The guy can show it to you. I'm not that smart technically to have it. There's other people that have it. But we need to do these things. And I really have a problem with this person who caused a lot of these things in DeKalb County, still working here in Cobb County.
Thank you, Ms.
Okay, I have
Reardon.
another list, but, you know, I'll send you emails. Thanks.
Is it Pax Riddle?
Good afternoon, Pax Riddle, unincorporated Marietta, not representing any particular group today. Although I do have one question that the people who complain to our county board about Dominion machines, I'm scratching my head because I'm not sure what you can do about it. Those are purchased by the state and you are required to use those. So I do not hold you guys responsible for Dominion machines. But the main thing I wanted to talk about very briefly was the recruitment and care of our volunteers for elections. We always know that there's a shortage of election workers, And so what can we do to try to ameliorate that situation? I hear frequently from elders, and including myself, that the shift is just too long for a lot of folks to work. Also for people that have children at home, that kind of thing. I've lived in, I think, 7 different states, and just about all those locations, the volunteer work at polls are by shift, like 4-hour shifts, which are easily workable by most anybody. And I think folks are happy to do that, come in for 4 hours, or if you want to work 8 hours, it's up to you. But each shift is being 4 hours. And I don't know why Cobb County has not done that or refused to do that, but I think it would make it easier for everybody and would help us increase the number of people that we could recruit to work at the polls, to volunteer at the polls on election days, okay? Also, evening training sessions would be very helpful for these folks as well. Right now, I think we only have daytime training sessions, if I recall correctly, for poll workers. So those were my main things, okay? Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Mr. Riddle. Is it a Patrick Hay, Hay? Or Patrice Hay? Yes. Okay.
I guess my writing is really bad. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Patricia Hay, and I've been a resident of Cobb County for 26 years. I come to you today as a citizen who considers voting a sacred honor, and I have consistently voted since I was 18 years old. In recent years, I've also served as a poll worker in Cobb County. This has given me a unique perspective on the inner workings of the election process. I've observed that some citizens, especially seniors, have problems adapting to the new technology, including the BMDs and the scanners. I recently became aware of a U.S. District Court case, Curling versus Rassenberger. It was 11/2020, and I now will briefly quote from it. Georgia's election code mandates the use of the BMD as the uniform mode of voting for all in-person voters. The use of electronic tech to independently and privately mark a paper ballot at the direction of an elector produce paper ballots which are marked with the elector's choices in a format readable by the elector, end quote. Can y'all read this? Can any of you read this? I can't. The Georgia voters can't. And that's what our vote is a QR code. So, in closing, it's your choice. You can conduct the next election on secure hand-marked paper ballots, hand-counted, and full and publicly available ballots, or you can continue to conduct the election on an illegal, unverifiable, inaccurate, insecure voting system that is an extreme financial burden for the county. Your responsibility is to protect the voters of Cobb County, not to support the agenda of a voting system or a vendor or the Secretary of State who have disenfranchised us with such a corrupt system. We need paper ballots, hand-marked at the precincts. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Hay. Mr. Parks?
Good afternoon. I'm Boyd Parks from Ackworth, and I am here speaking for myself. Good afternoon. Thank you for a few moments to address this august body, the folks here in person, and those who have tuned in by the magic of television, the internet, and however else you managed to get here. My objective today is to promote election integrity. Please understand that you are all invited to an event on Saturday, September 2nd at Mount Perrin North Church in the gym at 1700 Allgood Road in Marietta to meet and learn from Dr. Douglas Frank, physicist, chemist, and data modeling expert. We had a great meeting of some 120 souls back in June with Dr. Frank, where we learned much very interesting information, such as instances of the number of voter registrations exceeding the number of voting age population, and where the number of ballots cast exceeded the number of registrations. These anomalies and the algorithms that caused them were repeated in all 159 counties across Georgia, according to official data from the Census Bureau and the Secretary of State. Dr. Frank has been to 46 of the 50 states and found similar anomalies across the country. The upcoming meeting is nonpartisan and open to all citizens who desire to learn how election algorithms are used fraudulently. Assure yourself a seat by emailing Dr. Frank at votescope.org that you and X number of others will attend the Cobb presentation beginning at 8:30 a.m. on Saturday, September 2nd. Please help us turn around the corruption of our election system. There will be 4 more opportunities to see Dr. Frank September 3rd through the 6th in other communities in North Georgia. You can learn more at votescope.org. Please be sure to invite your elected and selected/appointed officials. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Amy Kremer, is it?
Thank you, Ms. Chairman. I'm Amy Kramer, lifelong resident of Cobb County, born in Kennestone Hospital. I've never spoken before the Cobb Board of Elections, and I'm glad to be here today. I'm here because I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. Our former President of the United States has been indicted in Fulton County for, quote-unquote, trying to overturn an election. Well, guess what? 2020 was stolen. It wasn't just 2020. It was 2022 also. And you guys thought we were going to go away and we're going to push it to the side and hide it. We're not doing it anymore. The machines are not secure. Our elections are not secure. I'm a citizen of the United States of America. My vote is my First Amendment right, and I want it protected. And as an official in Cobb County, it is your responsibility to make sure that my constitutional rights are protected. The machines are not safe, we are not secure. We've known that from the CISA report. Then the Haldeman report comes out and says the same thing, echoes that and even more. The QR codes we know are not readable, so therefore the Judge Amy Totenberg ruled that they're unlawful, but yet we're still voting on these same machines. It is not acceptable to continue to go down that road. We're talking about 2020 still. We're not going to stop talking about it. And if something's not done about it now, we're going to have the same thing happen in 2024. And we're not going to do this again. This is a thing. We can go to paper ballots, hand-counted, hand-marked, hand-counted paper ballots. It would actually save the county money, the taxpayers' money. And it is reasonable. We can do it. A method has been shown that one 4-person team can count 100 ballots per hour in an election of 12 to 15 races. A precinct of 1,000 ballots can produce hand-counted results in 3 hours with only 3 teams counting. To count faster, you add another team. There are patriots here today. We filled this room, and there are people that are willing to do it. We will do it. But what we don't want to do is to continue voting on machines that are not secure. And so we're asking to go to hand-counted ballots for the 2024 election, and we're not going to back down. We're not going to back down on that. And I say to the county, your voter rolls are your responsibility. Get them cleaned up. And to the Secretary of State, who's been gaslighting America, telling everybody that our elections are so secure and safe, it's BS. They're not. And he's recently said, you want to tamper with Georgia's election system, you go to jail. Well, Mr. Secretary of State, if you believe that, you should be the first in line. We don't need stiffer election laws. We need to follow the laws that we already have. Treason against the United States has very stiff penalties. We're not taking it anymore. This movement's growing. We're not going to back down. No patch. I went to Jekyll Island a couple weeks ago to speak at an election integrity event. I had a flat tire. They thought it could be patched. The patch wouldn't work. I was stuck there for 3 days because I had to buy a new set of tires. I was stuck. It cost me a lot of money, but guess what? It was worth it because then I knew I was safe getting home. No patches, get rid of the machines, and let's go to paper ballots.
Thank you, Ms. Kramer. Deb Coney, or is it Covey? Coney.
Hello, my name is Deb Cooey, and I am a resident of Cobb County. And I'm here today to advocate for election integrity and more specifically, paper ballots, hand-counted, hand-marked at the precinct with full accountability. I am one of thousands of Georgia voters, including many here in this room today, who no longer trust our voting system on the Dominion voting system because it's inaccurate, unsecure, illegal, unverifiable to the voter, and it puts an unnecessary financial burden on the counties. Our voting system is unverifiable to voters because it accumulates their votes from a QR code that cannot be read by the human eye. A U.S. District Court found our voting system's unverifiability violates 2 Georgia laws. The system never produced accurate results for Coffee County in 2020, and it declared the wrong winners in the 2022 DeKalb District 2 Commission vote. The recently unsealed Haldeman security analysis found the system was not designed, engineered, or tested properly for election security, and it cannot be retrofitted for security. The Secretary of State's rebuttal MITRE report has been ridiculed by 29 experts as dangerous and ridiculous. Nevertheless, he has continued conducting secretly counted elections with sealed ballots, even for his own unverifiable primary. OCGA 21-2-334 and 21-2-366 are overriding statutes that give the county authority over the conduct of its elections. The governor, secretary, and state election board have all admitted in court that the counties have that authority. So the choice is yours. You can conduct the next election on secure hand-marked paper ballots, hand-counted with full audits and publicly available ballots. Or you can continue to conduct the election on an illegal, unverifiable, inaccurate, unsecure voting system that is an extreme financial burden to the county taxpayers. Your responsibility is to protect the votes of county residents, not to support the agenda of the voting system vendor or the Secretary of State who have disenfranchised us with a corrupt system. I implore you today to please maintain our constitutional republic and don't allow us to become a banana republic.
Thank you, Ms. Cooey. Christine Rosman.
Hello, Christine Rosman, and actually I'm going to start off. I'm a Cobb County citizen for 20 years or so. I just wanted to finish up Hugh Norris's comment, which was, in my opinion, inaction and silence is much more than crickets, it is complicity. I, Hugh Norris, wonder what this board is helping or is trying to hide from the Cobb County citizen. And I'm finishing up Pam Reardon's speech, which is this county and every county is responsible for voter roll cleanup, as stated by the Secretary of State. How often does Cobb County maintain the voter integrity by doing list maintenance? And that is a question she has. And what I would like to say is that, I am speaking on behalf of myself and other common sense critical thinkers. and following these other critical thinkers that have come up and all question the same thing. And we get discounted, marginalized, and we have some very serious concerns. And it's time we get recognized for that. And my question is, why is, Janine Eveler was director for years. I think it was January or February, she said she was going to be resigning. I'm curious why this wasn't the most important thing, not only for the Board of Elections, but the Board of Commissioners, when you have so many people that are curious about what really went on with elections. And it's both parties, because both parties saw it. And I want to know why that was not, or is not. I think you have an interim person now that's going to be coming up, but that does not make sense at all. When this is, I mean, we're putting a former president through the ringer because he even questioned it. So are you going to question me? Or am I going to get kicked out for the T-shirt that I have on? You can't kick the can down the road. I mean, you are, but we deserve a hell of a lot more, pardon my language. We pay a lot of taxes to live in this county, and if it's not on your radar screen, I don't know what else we can do to tell you how important it is, and I don't mean to be patronizing, but I guess I am, how important it is that we get these elections figured out. And come on, the Halderman report, the MITRE report, all this, it's too much evidence of showing how bad things are. And if other counties are figuring out how to do the paper ballots, we can too.
Thank you, Ms. Rossman. That's the final speaker that's in the room. I believe we have two speakers for public comment that are on the line, starting with Ms. Erica Bailey. Ms. Bailey, are you on the line?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, members of the Election Board, and thank you for your service in these very important positions. I'm a citizen of Cobb County, by the way. I'm here today to encourage you to maintain consistent and extended regular voting days and hours from one election to the next, therefore ensuring a most representative democracy in Cobb County. How do these hours affect our democracy? First, regular voting hours promote accessibility and inclusivity. Regular voting hours ensure that a wide range of people can participate in the democratic process. People have different work schedules, family commitments, and responsibilities, and having extended and consistent voting hours allows more individuals to find a convenient time to cast their votes. Second, regular voting hours provide equal opportunity for all citizens to exercise their right to vote. If voting hours were inconsistent or limited, some individuals might face difficulties in finding time to vote, potentially disenfranchising certain groups of people. This could lead to unequal participation and representation within the democratic system. Third, having regular voting hours can help mitigate attempts at voter suppression. If voting hours are restricted or irregular, it could disproportionately affect marginalized communities who may have more difficulty accessing polling stations during limited timeframes. By maintaining consistent and extended voting hours, the chances of such suppression tactics are reduced. Fourth, regular voting hours can help prevent overcrowding and long lines at polling places. When voting hours are limited, it can lead to congestion as people rush to vote within a short time frame. Long wait times can discourage people from voting altogether, negatively impacting voter turnout. Fifth, regular voting hours encourages participation. When people know there is a reliable window of time in which they can vote, it can encourage them to plan ahead and prioritize their civic duty. This can lead to higher voter turnout, which is essential for a healthy democracy. Next, regular voting hours accommodate various schedules. Citizens have diverse schedules due to work, school, and other commitments. Regular voting hours accommodate diversity, allowing people with different schedules to participate without undue hardship. Finally, regular voting hours provide transparency and predictability to the voting process. Citizens can plan ahead, campaigns can allocate resources effectively, and election officials can better manage the process when they know when polling stations will open and close. For these reasons, I ask the board to keep these thoughts in mind as it sets the timelines for upcoming elections And again, I thank you for your service and understand that this is rather a thankless job. And again, appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Ms. Grubbs?
Grubbs. I'm a Cobb County resident, and I'd like to thank you for serving because I do know that it is a very thankless job. It is also a more thankless job when there's not transparency and when there's not an effort by the board to do some of the things that you need to do that fall under your purview. I'm not stupid. I know that the machines are probably not going to be dealt with by Brad Raffensperger, but if you were a truly innovative board and if you truly had the best interest of citizens at heart, what you would do is that you would come up with a plan to provide for audits and recounts and chain of custody and transparency. If you really cared about Cobb County citizens, that's what you would do. Because right now you're not fulfilling your fiduciary obligation to the citizens of Cobb County by not ensuring that Cobb citizens can sleep at night knowing that their vote is secure. One thing I notice on the agenda, I don't know why this is, but the Board of Elections doesn't seem to be doing an invocation or pledge, or maybe it's just not on the agenda and I missed it today. So I apologize if I'm in error on that, but I think that as citizens of the United States of America, and I'm sorry to tell Ms. Bailey, but we're not a democracy, we are a republic, and it's time that we correct our language and make sure that we use the appropriate words. So audits need to be put in place. I'm concerned about employing workers. I know that there are a number of workers that are available that have applied for positions that are not getting return phone calls, and I'm concerned that Republican applicants are not being considered for the job because we have a Democratic majority on the board. So if that's not the case, I would like for the board to address that and make that public as to why they are not entertaining hiring them. The other thing is one citizen, one vote is what should happen. And for every illegal voter that you have on the voter rolls, that is in your purview to do that. It is in your purview to make sure that we have correct voter rolls. And I have looked at the voter rolls and I see one address, which is a commercial business, which has over 180 registered voters at that address. And I'm wondering why you aren't spending your spare time when you're not on the dais or raising your families or making a living, why you aren't ensuring that the voter rolls are correct. So when you have people on the rolls that vote, that cancels out legitimate votes. And if the state is not going to do away with the voting machines, if we are not going to have a change with that, then we need to ensure that, as I said, other things are done to correct and right the ship when it comes to voting in Georgia and specifically Cobb County. So I would like for you to develop an action plan and come up with policies and procedures that you will implement to make sure that these things are accomplished.
Thank you, Ms. Grubbs. That concludes the public comment section of our meeting. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, the approval of the meeting minutes. We have several meeting minutes that were previously provided to everyone. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes? Yes. Does anyone have comments, questions, or proposed amendments to the meeting minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve them collectively, since there are no comments or proposed revisions to any of them.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bruning. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Ms. Fisher. It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the meeting minutes for the following meetings: June the 12th, a regular meeting; June 29th, 2023, a special called meeting; July 10th, 2023, a regular meeting; and July 24th, 2023, special called meeting. All those in favor? There is no opposition. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, our public hearing. I believe Ms. Hamilton will be presenting.
Good afternoon, Board. The first agenda item is to change the precinct boundary lines due to redistricting and some annexations for Ackworth, Kennesaw, Powder Springs, and Smyrna. So we're asking for the board to approve those precinct changes due to redistricting and annexations. And we had our GIS mapping, they had some server problems, so we weren't able to get you all maps, but we'll have those at future dates.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Hamilton? I note, Ms. Hamilton, that this was previously noticed via the Marietta Daily Journal,
Yes.
correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And on what date was that?
It was placed in, I'm sorry, I can't remember the date. It was my first week of vacation. So we published it for 30 days.
30 days, the requisite time frame.
Correct.
Does anyone else have any questions for Ms. Hamilton with regard to the proposed boundary changes as a result of redistricting and annexations? No? Okay. Yes, sir.
Erica, when will the maps be available that show these changes?
Actually, Mark, the GIS analyst who we have on loan from the Library Services, who was our part-time GIS analyst, is at the office working on those maps as we speak.
Will they be put on the website?
Yes, sir.
Good, thank you.
And my understanding, Ms. Hamilton, is it's not an issue of personnel, it's an issue with regard to the migration of the GIS system, correct? Can you
Correct.
just provide a little bit of context there, which will explain as to why the maps are not available at this
So
moment?
the county underwent a new server. The county's IT department moved to a new location, and all the servers were moved. And so in that migration, the GIS servers got disconnected from their normal place, and therefore the maps weren't, Mark was unable to generate the maps in a timely fashion.
Okay.
And again, he's on loan from Library Services. But these, the redistricting has been also published in the Marietta Daily Journal, and the annexations were also from the cities. So,
Ms. Fisher?
I do have a question from I believe he is an election consultant. He has been waiting for the list and the new maps and has yet, he did complain this morning via email, said he checked with the secretary, or the cities, I'm sorry, and that the list apparently provided to him is missing several people that have been redistricted within the new boundaries. He could not clarify where that was. Are we certain we have the districts right with the mapping?
yes, ma'am. And so we won't be able to provide, I know of the consultant you're speaking of. We're also have been in talks with him. We cannot provide him a list until these changes are voted upon by you as the board and by the Board of Commissioners.
Is this a public hearing?
Um,
I thought this was supposed to be a public hearing.
It is a public hearing.
When do we get to talk?
You will get to talk. I'm
Okay.
just, she's still presenting and the board is in.
Sorry.
Okay,
Thank you.
of course.
He may or may not have voiced his concerns. I did forward an email from him that we got several weeks ago. He was concerned that without these maps, they do not have a solid legal list of voters should they have wanted to qualify for office. So I'm not sure how that's dealt with. I just told him that I would bring up his issue today.
So when a person qualifies, they send it over to our registration department. We look at the maps to make sure that person is qualifying in the right district, and we verify that that person lives in the district based upon their address. So we do have the correct maps from the GIS department that was sent over to us from the city, from the cities in the city that you're speaking of.
So once they get there, they find out.
If they're in the correct district, yes. And that's with any qualifying
Yeah, I
that we
think
do.
the point he was raising was actually those who don't know.
Yes.
So, which is a legitimate complaint. So I brought it up. I did my due diligence.
Thank you. It might be helpful to the extent, I know that Ms. Hamilton made mention of the fact that she's been in touch with this particular consultant, and I don't know as to whether you were in touch with him today. It sounds, Ms. Fisher, as if he were in touch with you today. It might be helpful to the extent you've not previously done so, to forward that communication to Ms. Hamilton, because even in your comments, it sounded like you weren't exactly clear because he wasn't clear exactly what he was inquiring about. You said he could not clarify that for you.
He wasn't sure what addresses, but apparently he does have them. He probably got them from Miss Hamilton, but he asked if it had been updated. I'm happy to forward them to you.
Okay, excellent. Moving on to the next item, and just for the purposes, and I do note, obviously, it is a public hearing. We are in the public hearing portion of the meeting. What we will do, and I apologize for not making this clear from the outset, we've not had a public hearing portion of the meeting in quite some time, and as was previously noted, my understanding is a few of you all have not attended this meeting. We will have the member of our staff member provide each of the presentations that they have. We will vote on them individually at the conclusion of the public hearing, but prior to voting and after the presentations are made, then the public will be permitted to speak, and you'll have the same 3 minutes as was had during the course of public comment, and your comments should be limited to the topics upon which we are voting. So if no one on the board, on the dais, has any further questions or comments for Ms. Hamilton, we will move on to the next item in the public hearing portion.
And these board or precinct boundary changes requested by the cities. If we've talked about these previously, they have also been published in the MJD for the 30 days as required by law. Ackworth would like to change from 3 precinct boundaries to 1. So Ackworth 1A, 1B, and 1C will now become Ackworth 01. And that is just for this election and any runoff that happens after the November 7th election. The same with Austell 1A and 1B. They'd like to become one precinct, so it'll be AU 01, and that'll be for just this election, for the November election, and for any subsequent runoff. And Smyrna 3A and 3B would also like to combine to just be Smyrna 3A, and that will be for this election and the subsequent runoff.
Okay. And so in summation, Ms. Hamilton, each of these municipalities made a request, as they are legally, rightfully able to do so, to condense their polling locations down to 1 location as opposed to the 2 or 3 as has previously been in place for other elections, and it is solely for the purpose of the November 7th election and any runoff thereof.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Correct.
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Hamilton? And I know, Ms. Hamilton, we engaged in a pretty lengthy conversation, the board and you and Ms. Pringle, at last month's meeting with regard specifically to Ackworth A1, or Ackworth consolidating down to 1. Can you share with the board as well as with the public the communications that you've had with them as well as any of the other city managers with other municipalities with regard to any concerns that this office had with their request?
The only one that gave us concern was the city of Ackworth going from 3 precincts to 1, which will also change their polling location. At this time, as of today, at 2 o'clock, that location would have 17,282 voters. And we at the time we did it, they had 15,000 active voters. So this is both inactive and active voters. The 17,000, we did let the city clerk know that was not our practice. We usually try not to have a precinct with more than 4,000 voters in it because of the equipment. Had this been an election that was a federal election, they would have had to have at least 66 pieces of equipment, and that would not have fit in that location. But because the law has changed, it allows us some leeway to make some adjustments based upon advanced voting and things of that nature to cut down on the number of equipment needed. The clerk went back to her governing authority, and they came back with us that they would just rather have the the precinct and 1 polling location for this election due to past historical data as far as voting.
Okay. And so that was the communication with, I believe, the city clerk yes. In Ackworth. Was there any communication to the clerk in Austell, the clerks in Austell or Smyrna?
No, no, ma'am. Because the numbers, Austell was a little bit under 5,000 with active voters, and the same with Smyrna. It was around 7,000 with inactive voters, so we didn't pursue those as much as we would have. The 15,000 just kind of threw us, made us look at it a little bit differently.
Okay. So does anyone have any additional questions for Ms. Hamilton?
I know you provided us with the turnout for Ackworth, but if you could, for the public's knowledge, give us those numbers for the previous election turnout.
Let me grab it right here for you. And I only have the advanced voting numbers, but it's kind of similar to Election Day. In the past, Ackworth only voted 709 individuals during the advanced voting period, so. And I think it was a little less than 3,000 total. But that was in the previous elections.
Ms. Fisher, your question was about Ackworth only?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have anything further you want to ask?
No.
Okay. Does anyone have anything else to ask, to inquire about the precinct boundary, the recommended precinct boundary changes? No? Okay. Then moving on to the final item in this portion that will subsequently require a vote, the proposed polling location changes for November the 7th.
These are in line with the precinct boundary changes. So when we consolidated the precincts for Ackworth 1A, we made the polling place change from Blue Springs Road to Ackworth Community Center, and that was at the request of Ackworth. The same with, Ackworth 1A and 1B and 1C are all going to the same location. Austell 1A and 1B will go to the Austell 1A precinct, and then Smyrna 3 and Smyrna 3B will go to the Smyrna 3A location.
Okay.
So that's the result of combining precinct boundary lines.
Does anyone have any questions? They're just polling location changes associated with the precinct boundary changes recommendations.
And these are just temporary location changes for the November election and for the subsequent runoff, and these have also been published in the legal organ.
Okay. If no one has anything further for Ms. Hamilton, thank you, Ms. Hamilton. We will open up the public hearing portion. Again, as noted, you will have 3 minutes to speak. If you're planning to speak, it must be limited to the topics related to the proposed precinct boundary changes, recommendations, or the related local location changes.
Hi, I'm Pamela Reardon again. I have a really big concern about this board voting on things when they don't have maps in front of them. I have another huge concern about what's behind the maps, which data. When you're talking about the redistricting, are you talking about the maps that were signed by Governor Kemp and the Assembly, or are you talking about, are they based off the resolution by the commissioners for the home rule, which is not adjudicated and doesn't come up again until November, and is said by the AG Carr that they're illegal. So I would like to know the data behind this decision, and I oppose making any decision without, and you guys voting, without knowing that information. Thank you.
Christine Rosman. So my question for Ms. Hamilton is regarding the Ackworth and Smyrna precinct boundaries. Due to the errors in the Jarvis system and the corrupt voter rolls, did you actually canvass to ensure that the voter numbers are correct? So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rossman.
Good afternoon. My name's Robbie Huck. I live in the city limits of Marietta. And I'm just curious, as a fiscal uber conservative, when the cities, the municipalities are asking the board and the county to change some of the precincts and the polling places, is that part of the, I guess it would be I don't know the correct term, the proposal for the cost? Because I'm assuming that postcards have to be mailed to everyone who's affected in a timely fashion, and it has to be accurate where your new polling place is. And I'm just curious if that's in the bill. Do they know that cost? Is the city paying for that, I hope? I don't know, that's a question. Who's paying for it, and is it already figured in the cost before, or have you written out that proposal, how much the estimate's gonna be for the election? That's my question.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Ms. Hamilton, if you could come back up, please. With respect to the redistricting, I want you to provide the public and this board with information with regard to how we have come up, or how you've come up based upon the border changes. I will note, however, that the redistricting that we're talking about here is unrelated to the home rule maps. It's unrelated to that. These are municipal boundaries, correct, Ms.
Correct.
Hamilton?
So our Cobb County practice is to make sure our precinct lines go along with our ward lines. So Smyrna 3A is all of Ward Smyrna 3. Smyrna 3B is all of Ward Smyrna 3. So the redistricting, Smyrna did their own redistricting, as well as Ackworth and Powder Springs. So we had that was a city function.
So these are municipal lines,
Correct.
not
Yes.
county lines. So to the extent that there's a concern that lines are being modified consistent with the ongoing legal matter, that's not the case. It's an apples to oranges comparison. Those lines are not implicated in the proposed redistricting.
Correct. The only lines we're changing at this time are the municipal precinct boundary lines to be inclusive of the ward lines and the lines made by the city redistricting.
Okay. With regard to us managing, the county managing the elections, administering the elections for the municipalities, for everyone's purposes, if you'll explain the process. I know that we have entered into contracts, and those contracts provide for certain sums to be paid to the county, correct?
Yes. So the cities pay for, we do contract with the cities, and they pay for as you said, the printing of ballots. They have a percentage of the printing of ballots. They pay for the overtime staffing, pay for polling places and polling place employees, and they pay for the advanced voting sites. So the cost for the precinct cards will be included in that cost, and that is a official code of Georgia that municipalities after redistricting are to pay for their precinct or their new precinct cards.
Okay, excellent. Does anyone have any further questions based upon the comments made during the public hearing for Ms. Hamilton before we proceed to a vote? Okay, thank you. Okay, public hearing concluded, no one came up, so Ms. Choate, public hearing has concluded. We will move on to a vote unless anyone here on the dais has questions or additional questions or comments for Ms. Hamilton. No? Okay. With regard to the first item on the agenda, on the agenda for the public hearing, that being the precinct boundary change recommendations due to redistricting and annexations, is there a motion to approve these proposed boundary changes?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Bruning. Is there a second?
Second.
I apologize. Ms. Grubbs has noted, and unfortunately, are they on mute? Ms. Grubbs, Or,
My end was still on.
okay. They didn't speak up. Ms. Grubbs is noting that she would like to participate in public comment. I want to provide her with an opportunity to participate in public comment. So before we move to the vote, Ms., is she on? Is she just viewing it, or is she on? We're trying to provide an opportunity for people to participate virtually, but Ms. Grubbs, if you can hear me, can you speak up, please?
Madam Chair, can I just ask real quick, will Mr. Bruning withdraw his motion since?
Yes, please do.
Okay.
She says she's muted. I'm in communication with her as well. Sorry. It's all good. That's why I knew that she was attempting to.
That's if somebody's in the office and close the computer. We're working to get somebody to, they thought because public comment was over.
There is a public hearing, and they're permitted to make comments during public hearings. Okay. So we are going to need to move forward. I guess I can. It's not my preference. Yeah. So, do you know whether someone will be available?
They're supposed to get back in touch with.
Okay.
Do you want me to call her and put her on the mic?
We don't want to do that. We allow that practice for board members, but no.
Okay.
She's saying she's fine. I don't know whether you're getting the same comments that I'm receiving, but you did receive it, correct? Yes. Ms. Reardon? Yes. Okay, so we're moving forward. Mr. Bruning, do you have a motion for us?
So moved.
Is there, go ahead.
I propose we approve the precinct boundary change recommendations due to redistricting and annexation. Appendix A. Sorry. I move the first item on the agenda.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. It's been moved and properly seconded to adopt the precinct boundary changes recommendations due to redistricting and annexations as noted on Exhibit A to the agenda. All those in favor? The motion passes unanimously. With regard to the second item under public hearing, is there a motion?
Motion to approve the second point under public hearing, precinct boundary change recommendations to the Board of Commissioners for November 7th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bruning, for that second. It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the precinct boundary change recommendations for the November 7th, 2023 municipal election and any related runoff. All those in favor? The motion passes unanimously. And then moving on to the third item, to approve the polling location changes as they are associated with the boundary changes as previously approved for the November 7th, 2023 election and any related runoff.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded to approve these polling location changes. All of those in favor? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to the next item on our agenda, reports and updates. We've added this item to the agenda to the extent that a number of members of the public have requested and deserve to have some visibility into what's going on in our office. We've got 3 division managers. One of them is not here today as qualification for municipal elections began today, but we do have our prep center manager, Mr. Michael Dietrich, as well as our registration division manager, Ms. Erica Hamilton, that will provide updates. But before we get to that, our interim director, I believe this is the first meeting you've attended, sir, as interim director. So this is Gary Miller. He is our interim director, and he will provide updates from his office.
Good afternoon, board. A couple of things I wanted to go over in the office operationally. I have 2 items. The first is, as you know, we are, this is the first day of accepting absentee ballot requests by mail. It's, so far we've gotten 31 ballots, 30 UOCAVA, which are the international out of the country votes, and 1 regular application.
To be certain, Mr. Miller, these are applications for absentee ballots, as today is the first day.
Yes, ma'am, today's the first day. And that will continue on until 11 days before the election.
Excellent, thank
November
you.
7th, okay? And the second item I have is we're started qualifying today, as you mentioned earlier, for the November 7th municipal elections. The 5 cities, which are Acworth, Austell, Kennesaw, Powder Springs, and Smyrna. And that's going to go on all week, well, except Thursday, from 8:30 to 4:30 from today until Thursday. And Friday, we will be done. Thursday is the last day.
Okay.
We're having I do have a third item. On Thursday of this week, we're having a tour from the city managers of all the cities coming to our office to just take a tour, find out what we do, how we do it, and just to get an overall general review of what we do and for each department.
And those are the city clerks for each of the municipalities that we will be conducting their elections. They are going to be there at the offices,
Yes,
correct?
they will be. And that will be Thursday at, I think it started at 11:30.
Okay, thank you.
So at this time, I would like to have the division managers come up and kind of give an overall view of what's going on in the office. You want to start, Michael? Michael Dietrich is our prep center manager.
Good afternoon, Board. If you received this document that I gave you,
Yes.
I provided a short timeline of important dates upcoming for the municipal elections in November. If you notice, on September 9th, Tuesday, September 19th, we will conduct logic and accuracy testing on all the equipment. That'll start at 9 a.m. It is open to the public for anyone that would like to attend and kind of see how we do testing. It is very thorough. For this size election, we have 347 ICX or touchscreens to test, along with the scanners associated for each precinct. I anticipate it'd take us, I'd say, probably about 5 days max to test all of the equipment. We will be using in-house staff only. We will not have any temporary or day workers. For this size election, we just don't really need it. And this will give us opportunity to really practice our new procedures now that we're in the new building and kind of see where we are and move forward from that. October 12th, that's when we will deliver the advanced in-person locations. We have 2 on the 12th, which is Acworth and Powder Springs. 2 on the 13th, which is Austell and Smyrna. And we did have a conflict with delivery with the Kennesaw location, Ben Robertson, so we have to make a special delivery on the 14th, which is a Saturday. We'll begin the precinct deliveries for Election Day on November 2nd. Right now, it's planned for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and the Monday before the election. We will be using just our in-house crew, our trucks. We are not renting any trucks from Enterprise or any of the companies. We're going to handle it all in-house, which will save us a lot of money. On November 5th, that's when we will have area supervisor supply check and poll manager pickup. Typically, we would do those on 2 separate days over the weekend. However, with this size election, we can fit them both in the same day. I believe at 12 o'clock, the area supervisors will come in and check all their supplies. And then I believe at 3 o'clock is when the poll managers will actually come and pick up their items for Election Day. I think last election for the city of Mapleton, it was similar size. It only took about an hour and 15 minutes to complete all of it.
Okay.
November 7th, obviously, is the election. We'll have election night drop-offs at our headquarters. I anticipate needing around 75 individuals for the election night procedures. Most of those will be covered by our election staff. However, I will need 10 to 15 day workers or per diem workers to assist with that. And I have a huge database of people that have helped in the past, but if anyone here is interested, please feel free to reach out. We can always use help on election night drop-off. And then we'll start pickups the day after the election on November 8th. Right now, we're planning for Wednesday and Thursday pickups. I'm trying to do what I can so the veterans on my staff have the day off on Friday, which will be the observance for Veterans Day. However, if there's a conflict with any of the locations, we will pick up on Veterans Day if necessary. Happy to answer any questions that you guys have for me.
Thank you, Mr. Dietrich. Does anyone have questions for Mr. Dietrich? Or comments to the proposed or the actual
Yes, ma'am.
schedule? Yes.
Love the timeline. Thank you very much. And how many polls are we talking about total?
17.
17
Yes,
for
ma'am.
all 5.
Mhm. 5 early voting, 17 election day.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Anything further from Mr. Dietrich?
I do have one question. Since we're delivering the equipment quite a few days in advance for 2 locations, is that correct? There's 2 locations that are 3 days in advance, 2 in 2 days, and 1.
So we deliver on 3 days.
Yes.
There's five locations, but we'll
Okay.
do 2 on one day, 2 on another day, and then that 5th one is on a Saturday.
Okay, and the equipment will be secured how over the course of those days?
Sure. So with each polling location, they're required to have some sort of security, whether it be a locked room, a locked closet, camera system surveillance. The building itself has to be able to be secure, or else they don't have the opportunity to be a location. But on top of that, we chain up everything. So when we deliver the equipment and it's no longer in our custody, all of the equipment is locked, but it's also, there's cable ran through all of the equipment so it stays attached. Obviously, each carrier is about 800 pounds, so it's hard for those things to go missing, but we take the extra step to make sure that it's all chained together.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Dietrich. If no one has anything further, Ms. Hamilton?
The registration division has been pretty active over the last couple of weeks and months. So what we're doing now is conducting some preliminary work for the boundary changes in the polling locations. We do everything offline. Then the team provides that information to me. I check it over before we put it into the Jarvis system. So after the BOC votes tomorrow night, we'll begin putting that information into the Jarvis system to meet our September 8th deadline as set by state mandate. We had the ABM team to redo all their processes and procedures after last year's elections and after our internal audit. So we've been sitting down with our ABM leads and going through the process of looking over their new procedures and making sure they're in line and make sure there's a few checks and balances. We ask that you come out and see the new procedures if you'd like to. I think they have a lot of chain of custody as it's been described in this meeting earlier. So the whole system has been revamped. We did bring on our new elections ABM supervisor today, Dominic Thatch. So Dominic's first day was today. He'll be in the office full-time starting tomorrow. And so we're welcoming Dominic with open arms. Advance in person, they've held 2 informational sessions. They were very successful. The first day they had 67 participants, and the next time they did, they have 77 participants. And so I asked them, because of the success, to do a 3rd informational session, and this is to get seasonal workers to help with our AIP and ABM. Our team has also been doing list maintenance. As you know, there's an ongoing NGE process, and those are voters who have been inactive and then have contact with the office in 2 general elections. And for that, we mailed out 9,592 of those. As of today, 2,458 have been returned. 2,447 have no forwardable address, and 9 have a forwardable address. So we forwarded those 9 that had a forwardable address to those addressees to try to get them to complete that so they can remain in active status. 2 were completed of those that were returned. 1 was an actual voter who was sent the notice, and the other one was for a resident currently living at that address, so it wasn't to the person that we sent the notice to, it was to another individual currently living at that address. We also have had no contact, and after this process, these voters will go into inactive status. We mailed out 11,739. As to date, 117 have been returned, with 9 being completed. As of today, we have 11,572 applications sitting on our dashboard. Our registration staff is working overtime to make sure we meet those goals and dates. And then, as you know, the administrative coordinator for the registration division has moved on. She's gotten a new job at the Secretary of State's office. We wish her well. So we'll be looking for that position. We do have a few positions we have to fill, and the team is looking through resumes and going to start contacting individuals for interviews. And lastly, in your packet, we're going to do National Voter Registration Month. I'm teaming up with our elections division. And so for National Voter Registration Month, we're going to have some pop-up registration drives. And those are going to be in the cities that will be holding locations. We do have a few confirmations, but please check our website. We're still waiting on locations to confirm, so please check our website for those dates, times, and locations. And then we're going to do a big main event at our office on National Voter Registration Day on September 19th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So at that, we'll have your drive up. You can register to vote, check your voter registration status. If you need a photo ID for voting, we'll do photo ID. We'll allow you to fill out a request for an absentee ballot, and then there will be some guest appearances. Are there any questions for the registration division?
It's a lot of information, Ms. Hamilton. I do have questions. I'll defer to my colleagues first. So, Ms. Fisher?
I do have questions on the internal review. Are all of these policy and procedure changes that your team is in the process of doing, is that all in writing? Is it something you can send us for an update? Because your list is pretty long, as you know, and it appears there's 2 more days where the entire list of recommendations was, I guess, cited for a response. So it would be greatly appreciated, anything you have in writing, if you could forward that on.
We can definitely send you our new processes and procedures and our new policies.
Thank you.
How are you publicizing the pop-up registration drives in the main event to get the biggest turnout?
We will be partnering with, and I haven't had a chance to talk with him, but we will sending it out through our Cobb County Communications Department, and we'll also ask that you all make sure you put it up in your next door and anything else that you see fit. But our website, and then with the county's website, and hopefully through their Twitter account, we can send out the dates and locations.
To that point, Ms. Hamilton, will you be certain to email us an electronic copy or have someone in the office email us an electronic copy of this flyer so that we have the opportunity to do that?
And would the Cobb County Facebook page be able to publicize this too? Because I know they have a big following.
We will check with Director Cabot, yes. So I'm getting the yes. Anything else?
Couple things.
Okay.
That's all right. Hello.
Hi.
Since we're in the application process for absentee by mail ballots, you know what I'm going to ask. I definitely feel like I still want to see those, whether they're the daily totals, you know, that sort of reporting of what you're doing to track. And maybe that's part of the new process and procedures. So you said, oh, hey, come in and see what we're doing. So if you can let us know, maybe as opposed to just showing up, what would be a good date or time to come and watch and see what's going on with the new procedures being implemented. I'm certain that we would probably all, you know, take you up on that offer, but also in light of what we've experienced, I think it's really important to see those numbers, be able to strike those numbers, like say, okay, here's how many applications received, here's how many ballots went out, or here's what was rejected. You know what I'm looking for,
yes,
right?
we will definitely have. And I failed to mention, each voter, as they send in an application, will now receive a letter stating the date that we received their application and letting them know how to contact us if there's any questions. So going forward, whether it's via email or first-class mail, each voter that puts in an application will receive a letter saying, we are in receipt of your application. So that's one of the new things we put in place.
Great, and then those are going to be archived.
Yes.
So we will be able to say, hey, this is when this went out. Archives, time-stamped, all that good stuff?
Yes,
Okay.
they will be scanned to that voter's record in our own base system.
Perfect. And then the other thing is when we're talking about the letters that went out for all the list maintenance, I think it would be important for us as a board to kind of have that summarized, whether it's in a dynamic spreadsheet that we can just see the updates or something that you email out maybe weekly. But I know it's something that we're asked about, you know, in terms of how many letters have gone out, what's the status? And I think while we're in this 40-day window, that would be really good to just keep us updated in a reporting mechanism to see that if that's, I know it's something else on your plate, but I assume you had those
yes,
numbers,
yes.
so you're tracking it. I
Yes.
think we just need to be able to have some visibility into that tracking as well. I assume everybody.
I don't think our team, we'd be more than glad to provide you that information because they are tracking that on a daily basis.
Right, I figured I'm not asking for something that's not out there, but I just feel like because we're asked about it and just being able to stay up with what those numbers are and sort of where we're at with active versus inactive voters in Cobb, I'd like to be on top of that.
Okay.
Thanks.
And we'll do.
And so I have a few questions. With regard to the number, I believe it was 11,572, those are those are registration requests that are in the portal awaiting processing?
Yes, on our dashboard. So these are people that registered through OLVR or through DDS.
Okay. You have the sufficient human resources to get through this in a timely fashion
Yes.
such that anyone that has registered to vote will have the opportunity to vote in this upcoming municipal election?
Yes, at the beginning of last week, we had 24,000, so the team has been working overtime to knock that down. So they've been working extra hours at nights and on the weekends. So.
Okay. And just for my understanding, this last week, 24,000, it's great that this week, we're starting off a week with 11,000.
Yes.
This represents applications received over what time period?
We have been.
Generally?
I would say the last maybe 2 or 3 months. So.
2 to 3 months, okay.
How long after someone submits their registration do they actually get processed?
So it depends. We do first in, first out. We tried not to go over a 48-hour period, but as you know, we had a couple of elections, and so we usually put a hold on the registration. And so we're catching up on those that happened during that period, and so it's usually a 48-hour turnaround our time.
From the time they send in their...
Send it in until we get it in our office. So.
No, but like until they're approved to be registered to vote?
So it's, you put it into the system, and it's an overnight process because they have to go through the verification process. And once they go through the verification process, and I will admit, with Jarvis, the verification is taking a little bit longer. We have noted to the state, and that's one of the reasons we do have some backlog. We had some things we reported to the state that weren't working in our favor, and they have corrected those. So we have begun making progress on those 24,000 that were in.
Mr. Bruni?
Erica, the 11,000 potential voters are for the county-wide, not just for the municipalities that have an election in November?
Yes, sir, it's countywide.
Okay.
Were these all individual applications, or were there batches submitted by third parties?
No, the ones that are on the list are from OLVR and DDS, so that's online voter registration, so they're submitted by the individuals.
So some are motor voter applications that you just have yet to enter?
Correct. And as I stated, there was some backlog due to the changeover to Jarvis, but we have worked those issues out with the state.
Okay, thank you.
The other question I have with regard to, I believe it was NGE, you said that there were a number that were returned with no forwarding address, but some were returned with a forwarding address, and you and your team are going to get those back out. What is the time frame within which those individuals must respond?
Well, the 40-day clock began on those on 7/27/23, and so after that 40 days, they will become canceled. But if they return it after those 40 days, they will be put right back on as regular voters. So,
Okay, and that was my rationale for, or the reasoning for asking, such that we're making certain that we're communicating that 40-day window doesn't start when they receive it. It started as of, I believe it was 7/27?
7/27.
Okay. And we have notices on the website with regard to these timeframes, correct?
Yes, and we will also have the final NGE list, those people that will be moved after the 40-day clock is over. Once we get the final list, we will put those up to let people know who's been placed in council status because they did not return the NGE confirmation notice.
Okay, and if I'm placed in canceled status because I didn't return it within those 40-day period, is there some information that's communicated how I can get myself out of canceled status?
If we have a forwarding address, we will send you something. If we do not have a forwarding address, there is the list. So we will also work with our Cobb County counterparts in communication to try to get something out as well.
Okay, excellent. And congratulations on getting Mr. Thatch in. I don't know, it might be helpful. I know that I had the opportunity to review his resume. He's a long-term Cobb County employee, but it might be helpful from our colleagues to hear a bit more about Mr. Thatch.
Yes, Mr. Thatch comes from the clerk of court system. He has at least 20 years of management experience. Met with him today. He's eager and ready to start. From his references, I've heard that he had a good rapport. He's management driven, he's innovative, and he's going to make sure the job gets done. So we will hit him hard tomorrow morning when he gets in, and I think he's ready to go. He was a little bit overwhelmed today, noting that it was the first day of accepting ballots, but I think after a few days his nerves will come and he's ready to go.
And, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, what was his position in the court system?
He was a supervisor over records management.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll just say, Dominic was known as the clerk that you called if you needed to get, like, if I needed to file an election petition to keep a polling place open, you talked to Dominic and he was going to get it done. Like, that was his reputation among the legal community, is like, if you need someone at the clerk's office that's going to get it moved, he can do it. So I'm going to add my comment. I didn't even know he applied. I'm glad it's coming over because I was sad to see him
That's
leave the
good
clerk's
news.
office.
Plus, we have one other manager from the court system who's done a great job. So just curious what Dominic did.
Yeah. And I will say further to that point, I had the opportunity to speak to both of his referrals, his references, and they spoke, as Mr. White did, very highly of him. He's very detail-oriented. He has obviously familiarity with elections, given some of the work that he's done to support holding polling locations open. But I think his his kind of tending to be detail-oriented and just the level of respect that he was able to command, as well as in managing people. Those were some of the highlights of what his references shared with me. So,
And I'm sorry I didn't have him at the meeting today, but I'll try to have him at the meeting in October.
please do invite him to the meeting, but I'm guessing that some of us will meet him prior to that.
Yes,
But I don't have anything further for Ms. Hamilton. Does anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you. And then I just note that the manager for the elections division is not here, obviously, because today is the first day of qualifying, and she and her team are out in the various municipalities administrating the qualification process. But Ms. Carol Pringle will be here with us during regular scheduled meetings to provide an update on her division as well. With that, we'll go on to the next item under reports and updates. That's me. So together with my colleague here, Ms. Fisher. So with respect to the director search, at the last convening of this board, we made a decision to engage in a search firm. That process is underway. Ms. Fisher and I meet with the search firm representatives on a weekly basis. We finalized the job description. We anticipate it. If it did not get posted today, it will definitely be posted tomorrow. We've provided the job description to our colleagues as well as to Drs. Gibson and McMorris at the county. And so that is where we are. We have a timetable as was previously, or general timetable as was previously shared by our procurement team, and we're adhering to that time frame. I don't know whether anyone has any questions, or for that matter, Ms. Fisher, if you have anything to add, because we are partners in this process.
We are advancing. We have gotten pretty good service from our search firm so far, and hopefully that will continue. We hope to get a lot of responses in a very short order. Hopefully with this large search firm, we will be able to.
What is our target date to receive the candidates, the resumes?
Right. Unlike when we were working with the county, we do not have to wait until, quote, there is a closing. As the search firm receives applications, or for that matter, as they're proactively doing outreach, to your suggestion, Mr. Bruning, we are providing them with the Gavrio listing. Thank you, Ms. Hamilton, for sending that listing to me, such that, again, this is a two-part process, in as much that the position will be posted such that individuals can reach out to Insight Global. However, we anticipate, and they've committed, and it's part and parcel of how they normally manage their searches, is to do outreach to prospective candidates based upon the positions that they currently hold. So a very long-winded way of saying we will not be waiting until the end or some date certain. As the applications come to them, they will be providing them to us.
Will we see everyone that comes in, or will there be like a screening process before?
There is somewhat of a screening process. Okay. Obviously, we've set some.
What's the score?
Someone sent me an MDJ article about an election day, and apparently when you open an MDJ article, it gives you a Braves highlight.
I was going to say, the Braves. There will be much to celebrate once we get this elections director in place. And that's just a, yeah, I guess that's just foreshadowing it. But to answer your question, with regard to screening, yes. Yeah. We have minimum qualifications. Obviously, Great. You all have seen them. The minimal qualifications are 10 years of elections experience. So yes, there will be some screening out, if you will. For example, if someone comes and they don't meet that minimum. Great. We do offer some flexibility. So if the person has 8 years of elections experience, do we throw that application out? I think not. That's the type of information per our conversation that would come to us, and we as a board will communicate via email, as we have been doing, to provide our input to them.
Perfect.
Anything further? Okay, no. That is it as far as the updates. We will move on to the next item on the agenda, old business. I don't have any, or that what I do have, I'm reserving for board member comments. New business, Ms. Hamilton, I think you'll be presenting to us the proposed AIP locations and schedule.
Board members at your station, you should have the proposed locations, and these have been discussed with the cities for these upcoming November 7th advanced voting locations.
Oh, he has one?
I thought I gave him one. I did.
You can have mine.
So Ackworth will be at the Roberts Community School and Education Center, Austell, Collar Park Community Center, Kennesaw Ben Robertson Community Center, Smyrna Community Center, Powder Springs Warren Anderson Recreation Center. We are proposing Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., and both mandated Saturdays, 9 to 5 p.m. On your second page, you can see what the cost would be if we had the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and 9 to 5 on Saturday, or the proposed hours. And also the estimated budget we sent over to the cities is the final column. If we choose the hours that we've gone with historically in the past, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., with that would be $38,000 over budget. And if we go with the proposed hours that we're going, it'll be $28,000 over what we estimated to the cities. And finally, in the last page you have shows the ballots that were cast in 2021, but also be mindful that you had a countywide SPOS on that election as well. So, but those are the dates and times we're proposing, beginning on October 16th and concluding on November 3rd. In all locations, we'll have a drop box.
Yes, go ahead. Yep, absolutely.
So you're proposing the one that has a little bit shorter hours, Monday to Friday, 8 to
Yes.
5 versus 7 to 7. Are you proposing that for the cost savings or a different reason?
The cost savings, and that's historically what we've done for municipal elections in the past, but we know the board has had a change of doing the 7 to 7. So this is what was done at the last municipal election. And I believe that's what the estimate was that we quoted to the cities.
Have the cities reviewed this? Have they had any input to it?
They just gave us the locations. They had some input on the locations, but the dates are set by law, and we get to set the hours, so.
Right. So you've not received any input from them as far as the hours?
No.
Okay.
When we gave them the estimate, we just gave them the estimate hours of 8 to 6 and 9 to 5 on Saturdays.
Erica, when you say estimated, so that means that they know that that price is going to fluctuate?
Yes, it was just the estimate, yes, yes.
Number two, I noticed that there's, that the significant difference is really coming, from this overtime piece.
Yes.
But that could be mitigated as
Yes.
well.
We're going to try to do to try to not have as much overtime for these elections and elections going forward. We're going to try to work for shift work, but some of our workers they would like to keep the same. By law, we have to keep the same managerial staff during the day, but the clerks can change. And so this election, we didn't hire too many additional clerks. We used the ones we already have on staff for the other elections. So we will try to mitigate the overtime, yes.
Okay.
Yes. And not only for our advanced voting staff, for our staff in the office as well, so.
I mean, I definitely think that mitigating that anyway, regardless of an hour situation, from just an exhaustion, mental health perspective, 3 weeks is a long time, and it's a lot of hours, however you slice it. So I think when I look at that column, I say, well, I think we're going to mitigate that cost in some other ways by looking at how we staff.
Correct. And we'll look at it the first week. If we don't see as much turnout, we usually will let people go home. The last week will probably be the biggest turnout, and that's when we'll have a lot of overtime.
So if you go into overtime, it appears that you're calculating it all fairly evenly. 2 assistant managers, 2 managers. Isn't that redundant to have multiple managers?
You have to have, by law, 1 manager and 2 assistant managers at each location. And so each day, we can mitigate that by having managers do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or in Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So we're working at how we want to help to mitigate some of that overtime hours. But we do have to have those 3 in place.
Maybe I'm reading it wrong.
You see the extra manager on there and then assistant manager, and it's just showing a difference in price. We moved up some of our clerks, and so they're willing to step in and be an assistant manager. So they're right now on our books as a clerk, so they get paid to $7.25 an hour instead of $7.75, and they are aware of that, and they were okay with that change. But after the election is over, they'll go back to their clerk position in the office and make the $7.25. So our managers make a little bit more than our clerks and our assistant managers. And that's why the asterisks are by those. Those are people that are stepping up into those spots.
So is this a statute or a rule?
This is what we have in place. This is what they are on the Cobb County. That is their hourly rate on the Cobb County payroll.
Is your question with regard to the requirement to have 1 manager and?
Yes, that's
by law.
That's by law. That's
That's
state
by
mandate,
law,
yes.
that
State
1 manager and 2 assistant managers
Correct.
from open to close.
Correct.
Okay.
Noting that, does anyone have anything further? Noting that in any instance, or in either instance, there is an increase over what was estimated, have we been in touch with municipalities to advise them of the fact, as Ms. Mossbacher noted, it's merely an estimate. I know we communicate to them, but just giving them a heads up on what we think that variation may be?
We have not. This came to my attention, and I wanted to let the board know, so we have not made that, let the cities know that it's going to be a potential overage in costs in the estimation.
Okay. It's something in consult with the interim director that we may want to do just to, such that there's no sticker shock. And again, noting that we communicated to them that what they were agreeing to when we agreed to manage their elections for them was an estimate, but we may just want to give them a heads up as to what that overage might look like.
I can work with Mr. Miller on that.
You're already on.
Just regarding that, I'd just like to comment that a few months ago, there was a lot of controversy in an adjacent county about their cost for running elections for cities. And we did a little comparison of that county's cost versus our cost, Cobb County's, and we are dirt cheap. We were less than, I forget what it was exactly, like 25% of what the other county was charging. So yes, there may be a few numbers that need to be adjusted, but even with those adjustments, we're really giving the voters in these municipalities a great bargain compared to what other counties in the area charge.
Yes, sir. And we're working to get those costs of what we get from what the other counties charge their municipalities so that we can have it on record.
Yep.
Great.
So just for clarification, the municipalities are not aware of this kick-up in the price on the choices we have on hours?
The hours they are aware of is the cost and the people we put in place. And so we use that to know that what we need to actually manage a polling place. And so I'm not sure where the estimate originally came from, but yes.
So we're going to be required to vote on an issue that the cities don't even know exists yet? Are we voting
You're voting.
to absorb the additional monies? Can you clarify
No, you're
this
not,
for me?
the cities have signed a contract that they'll pay the cost. What I'm just saying is that we looked at what was sent over to the cities as an estimate. And we looked at it, and that would not be a sufficient number of people to run the election. And so therefore, we have looked at what makes a sufficient number of individuals to run an election. So therefore, the cities have not been given this potential overage. And as Board Member Mossbacher stated, that this may not be as huge of an overage as it is listed because we're going to try to mitigate overtime.
Oh, I apologize. Go ahead.
That's okay. The way I read that, then, since they are not aware of the choices on the hours or the overage, we're going to be voting on something they aren't aware of. I mean, am I missing something here?
My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that this happens consistently. This is not the only instance in which this happens. We provide estimates. We sign the contracts with the municipalities. I want to say the first contract I signed was probably in maybe April.
Yes.
Or I know our prior director was here. So an estimate is created based upon historical information. And then contracts are presented to the counties. Those contracts are subsequently negotiated with the counties and they are signed. But it's expressly stated in those contracts that the amount is an estimate.
Correct.
So
yes.
it would not be a surprise, nor is it uncommon for the counties, for the municipalities to pay more than what was previously discussed with them. I think the point that we're raising here is with regard to this is what this team has identified to be the number of team members that are required to manage the election. They're going to take every effort that they can to mitigate the overages. But then the point that I raised was just trying to be proactive and giving the municipalities a sense of what that overage amount will be.
Yes.
This is the maximum it will be.
Yes.
It very well could be lower, correct, Ms. Hamilton?
Correct, yes. And we, by the cities in that contract, I do believe, give us the authority to make the advanced voting times and locations. So they are aware of that.
But if we vote today, just so I understand it, because I want to make sure I know what I'm voting on. If we vote for the proposal 7 to 7, Monday through Friday.
No, that's not
That's
what we're
not the
proposing.
proposal.
We're proposing 8 to 6, Monday through Friday, and 9 to 5 on the mandatory
Am I
Saturdays.
missing that? I guess I should put my, okay, thank you.
So these proposed times are consistent with previous municipal elections.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So far, nobody has proposed expanding those times.
No, sir.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I believe, if I may, just for the benefit of the top line that you're seeing there, Ms. Fisher, I think because at times this board has spoken about remaining consistent, and in larger elections, we have proposed 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So to the extent, and if I might, Ms. Hamilton, I think she was trying to get ahead of us just a tad bit, and rightfully so, to let us know what the financial impact would be for the municipalities if we did 7 to 7 versus 8 to 6, which is what they are proposing. Am I correct?
Yes, yes. We want to make sure you have all that you need in order to make a.
Yeah, and these are questions that we've previously asked you in this form, so I appreciate you being proactively and providing it to us.
Thank you.
I just want to go to the estimating tool for a minute. So I think we probably need to review that tool, just as like putting it out there, how we actually estimate for the municipalities. I've seen what's used in the past, and I think that it looks like a very big discrepancy because I don't think that tool is quite as effective as it could be.
Yes.
So I just want to say, I think that should go on our to-do list. I'm happy to consult or work with you on that tool, or however we want to look at it as a team, but I do think we need to do that.
I think that's a good idea.
So I think in addition to that, but to the point that Mr. Bruning made, even reevaluating how we cost things.
Yes.
Yeah, so. Is there anything further? Are there any other questions that anyone has for Ms. Hamilton with respect to the proposed advanced in-person voting schedule?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Yeah. So if there's nothing further with respect to discussion on the proposed advance in-person voting options for the election on November the 7th, 2023, I will entertain a motion to approve it as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bruning. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the proposed AIP voting options for the November 7th location in the 5 municipalities, Monday through Friday, 8 to 6 p.m., Saturdays, 9 to 5 p.m., and then that's it, Monday through Friday, 8 to 6, and Saturday, 9 to 5. All those in favor? I note, I did not yet call for opposition, but I note that Ms. Mosbacher has opposed this. The motion carries 4-1. There you go. Thank you. All right, moving on to board member comments. So I provided each of the board members with some information. If I could ask you to direct your attention to the email correspondence entitled Video at BOE Meeting. You should have an email thread. Yep, that's it. So this is email correspondence that I had with Ms. Christine Rossman. You'll see there on Wednesday, August the 2nd, she reached out to inquire about the ability to show videos off of, quote, our phone via the overhead projector or provide a flash drive to the AV person, noting that at BOC meetings that is permitted. Her inquiry was, do we have the capability to share video during public comment at BOE meetings? Obviously, with Mr. Cabot being the Director of Communications for Cobb County, I forwarded, and you see that in the email thread, I forwarded this communication to Mr. Ross Cabot. And I understood him to provide input, and I shared with him my reading of her message was that it seemed to suggest that at a BOC meeting, anyone speaking during public comment could stream from their phone. I noted that does not sound right to me. We don't allow that during BOC meetings. And he says, no, we do have a provision that anything, and this is Mr. Cabot's response, no, we do have a provision that anything to be shown in a meeting be submitted in advance. We've played media off of phones before. However, that was when our equipment malfunctioned and we used a phone to play a video that had been previously submitted and screened. He did note, however, that that is a board decision. And so I thought it appropriate to bring it to the balance of the board with regard to whether we allow for the submission of any type of audio visual that would be played during board comment, public comment, and then as to whether we would permit someone to play video off of their phone. But as you see here, how it's handled at the BOC meetings, as described by Mr. Cabot in his email correspondence. Does anyone have any comments?
I can't imagine why we wouldn't allow it, as long as it's not some kind of striptease act. I mean, as long as it's appropriate content, is there a reason we shouldn't allow it?
I've not suggested a proponent that we should or we shouldn't. I'm just bringing it to the entire board because, again, as Mr. Cavett made reference to, he said that they would ask that anyone send these materials to presentations@cobbcounty.org prior to the meeting. Whether or not you allow that would be the board's call. I do have personally, though, however, to your question, have a question or have a concern with folks just signing up for public comment when they arrive, as they are required to do so unless they're going to participate virtually, and then just being there at the podium and pressing play on their phones. Anything that is played, or for that matter, if it's just audio that's played, I believe it should at a minimum be screened consistent with the process that Mr. Cavett made reference to in his email.
Sounds reasonable.
I've been at school board meetings and Board of Commissioner meetings, and neither of them do what we're talking about. So I don't know why we would break precedent and allow that at a Board of Elections meeting.
And when you say they don't do what we're talking about,
let
that's
someone
playing.
play a video at a public comment.
But if it's been pre-screened, they can play it.
Is that what our policy is currently?
There is not a present policy, and that brings me to my other public comment policy item in board
Well,
member
I'd
comments.
like to respond because they do it all the time in Board of Commissioner meetings where they'll present either a PowerPoint, a video. I
Right,
mean,
so that's
it's
a pre-screened-
it's done, it's
pre-submitted.
It's
pre-screened.
pre-screened.
Yeah.
Which is what Mr. Cavett recommended.
correct, yes.
Okay.
So it sounds like we have no policy, and the question is, what do we want our policy to be?
That's why I'm bringing it to the board.
I think, my personal opinion is we ought to do the same as Board of Commissioners. Allow pre-screened material to be displayed or played, but only pre-screened material. And I don't know how the commission does the pre-screening, but I would assume it has to be a day before or some time frame before the meeting.
Mr. Cavett did not reference the time frame within which a public commenter would need to provide that information. I believe we would work with him, and how timely is it that he has joined us? But no, it's noted here that the materials would be sent to presentations@cobbcounty.org.
My ears were burning.
You may take the mic, sir. You will recall, Mr. Cavett, the email correspondence I shared with you about 2 weeks ago from Ms. Rossman inquiring about the ability to play video and/or make presentations here during our meetings. If there, and I was obviously I've shared it with the board, I wanted to inquire, I'm glad that you walked in because I did not inquire about the number of days in advance that someone should send that to you. But as we're determining what our policy should be, we'd like that input.
We've made requests to the board before, and there's probably going to be something coming before the Board of Commissioners about at least a 24-hour in advance notice for anything that needs to be played. We have two issues with that. One is IS has, for security reasons, made it clear they don't want anything played that would be plugged into our system in any way and displayed without it being scanned first. So we've typically do that. We do have an issue doing that when somebody brings something right up to the podium, and that has created a problem before. And the second issue we have with Cobb TV and these broadcasts, we're a PEG station, which means we fall under the auspice of the FCC, and we still have to follow their guidelines about what is acceptable to show on these broadcasts, so we need to screen to make sure that that's done as well. My preference is 24 hours in advance through the email. That helps us with the screening as well. And, that's what we would ask.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Cavett? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us. So it would seem as though the board, there's consensus with regard to at least this portion of a policy with regard to the playing of any type of video or audio, that we would permit it. The information or the video or the audio file will need to be submitted to our communications department not less than 24 hours prior to the board meeting date. for screening. Does anyone have any comments?
Since our board meetings are on Mondays, we probably need to clarify that it's business days.
Business days.
Yeah, just because we're on Monday, so we don't want them to submit it on Sunday and say that's 24 hours, so we probably just need to be
Right.
clear.
And I think what we'll do is, provide a date, a time certain.
Yeah.
In as much that coming out of a weekend, I think it needs to be submitted such that they have the opportunity to clear it Friday.
Right, like it can't be Friday at 3 PM, even though that's
Exactly.
20, yeah, I feel as if we need to sort of say maybe Friday morning or Thursday, close of business, something like that, I don't know. But we need to account for the fact that lots of people aren't here Friday afternoons.
Right.
And then there's the weekend leading into our meetings.
Okay. But generally, and absent, aligning on the language right this moment, generally it seems as though we're, favorable in permitting this, and that it will be some period, 24 hours prior, give or take a couple of hours here and there because of our meetings being on Mondays.
Makes sense.
Okay. Does anyone have any further
Mr.
comments?
Chair, I just,
Yes.
also would want the board to make clear in adopting a policy that they, as in today where the comment period was shortened to 3 minutes, if someone submits a 5-minute video and the board just needs to reserve discretion to say, someone submitted a 7-minute video, today we're limiting comments to this amount because of the number of people signed up. It's gonna count towards that person's time, and just would wanna make sure that's clear
Okay.
ahead of time.
I'm not sure I'm totally comfortable with the whole video proposal. I think having a PowerPoint deck that goes along with your comments makes a lot of sense. But do we want someone to show like a commercial or, I don't know, a campaign ad or something that is not actually their own comments? Just throwing it out there.
Right.
Like, do we want any kind of criteria of what the video or audio could be about? Or is it a free-for-all?
No, I personally would not be in favor of a free-for-all. I do believe that there should be some discretion, not just with respect to time, as Mr. White made reference to, but with respect to content, and not substantive content, but, to Mrs. Fisher's reference to, a striptease. I will say, however, that when you layer on that additional review period, that is going to lengthen, in my opinion, the number of days in advance. For example, if it's submitted on a Thursday at 10 a.m., or, Mr. Cavett or someone on his team will receive it, do we provide him and his team with criteria? Do we leave it to their discretion, given their experience and how they've supported the BOC? Does it need then to come to us? I mean, there are a couple of questions that are outstanding. At a minimum, I'm not suggesting that we walk away today with the policy. I just think, understanding what the basic framework of the policy would be, and that we'll work to propose a policy at the next meeting.
I've been going to BOC meetings for at least 10 years. I've never seen a video I thought was inappropriate or didn't fall within a person's First Amendment right. I think videos could be beneficial, actually. Let's say someone stood in line for an hour and a half and brought their video recording for how long they stood in line. And it could be truncated to when they started, when they finally got in the door. So I think limiting it, I mean, there could be a whole slew of things. I think we just reserve the right, Daniel, to reject any inappropriate content, or however that would be legally worded. But I've never, and Mr. Cavett can probably answer it better than I can, but I think I predate him on BOC meetings, so I've never seen anything inappropriate.
Okay. Mr. White, you were saying?
Let's work on a framework, and then anytime we talk about regulating speech based on the content of the speech, I want to make sure it gets a good First Amendment review. So I wouldn't want to just decide it on the fly here. So maybe the staff and the board can work with Communications Department and see how the Board of Commissioners handle it, and what kind of scrutiny they apply to it, and if that makes sense for this board, y'all can discuss it, and we'll just make sure it meets. We want to make sure everybody, A, has the right to be heard and is not regulated based on, content of their speech. But recognizing there are certain things that aren't appropriate for a board meeting setting.
Great. I mean, and I think there's not going too far down that rabbit hole, but I mean, there have been, excuse me, cases that speak to kind of what is appropriate versus what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Could be very subjective. You ask, 5 people what's appropriate, you very well may get 5 different answers. So I agree with you, Mr. White, and we will work together in this intervening period between now and the next meeting to come up with a proposed policy. If there's nothing further on that, the other item that I provided with you to you is a excerpt from the 2022 Georgia Code with respect to elections and primaries generally and statewide voting equipment. So I know during the course of today's meeting, as well as at prior meetings, in addition to email correspondence that's been sent to, I believe, each of us, there are requests and suggestions that we should move to paper ballots. However, and I do also note that on the Firefly system, which is an email distribution portal that election officials, as well as the Secretary of State's office, participates in. There was a question that was specifically raised with regard to some counties that are reporting that they are moving to paper ballots. And I believe it was Deputy Director of Elections, Jesse Harris, responded, and he referenced this code provision, and therefore I provided to you around the use of equipment. And for your purposes, Mr. White, and I apologize for not bringing you a copy, but I'm quite certain you're intimately familiar with this particular code provision. If you will share with us, I believe your colleague at our most recent regular meeting made reference to this, whether this county is in a position to make a decision not to use the equipment as provided by the Secretary of State.
Sure, and just to be clear, this isn't just something, this is not my legal opinion or the board. This is just in consultation with the Secretary of State and their legal counsel and other county counsel around the state. But yeah, this provision of 21-2-300 mandates the use of the state-provided equipment. The section that's often cited, and I'm not going to try to quote it, it talks about, you hear a lot of folks saying you can use different paper ballots or other methods. And again, I'm not quoting, but if it's impracticable or impossible to use, the equipment provided, but that's not, to date, I've yet to see any opinion from the Secretary of State or any court saying that the machines that the state has provided make it, there's any circumstance where it's impractical or impossible to vote. Now that could change on, if there's an emergency at a voting location, that's different. But in terms of a proposal that would say, you can find that it's impracticable or impossible to run the election on these on the state provided equipment. I've not seen any other jurisdiction that's come to that finding, and that could change. It sounds like some other counties are looking into that, but as far as I read the law and the cases that have touched on it so far, there's no basically until the Secretary of State indicates otherwise. The system has been deemed and certified as the system that's provided to the counties, and this is mandatory language in 21-2-300, and the board, unless there's evidence presented that it's impracticable, or I'm not using the direct quote from the other section, but that's not been the case in any prior election. And this same language has been brought up since 2017 in multiple jurisdictions and in multiple court cases, and at no point has either the Secretary of State or the court system found that it's applicable. So the way I read it, and my advice to this board is that 21-2-300 is binding, and that's the equipment that has to be used.
Okay. And just for purposes of kind of clarity, 212334, I believe, Mr. White, that is the provision you were making reference to. It's entitled Voting by Paper Ballot when using a voting machine. I'm sorry, when use of voting machines impossible or impracticable. And so that's what you were referring to, correct?
Yes, and honestly, if you go dig a little deeper and you look at the voting machines and the way that voting machines is defined in state statute, it actually talks about the old lever machines.
Mhm.
And that's what voting machine is defined as there's a separate definition for ballot marking devices and electronic scanning device. Like each of those things is defined by code.
Mhm.
And if you're going to go by the terms in the statute, then the legislature is deemed to use the words they intend to use. They said when you can't use voting machines, because we get the same argument where we have people filing petitions saying we should have had a referendum to use voting machines. Well, the courts go back and look and say a voting machine is defined under this method, and so you have to look back. You always got to reference back the definitions in the statute. So that's a more technical legal grounds, but both from a legal definition standpoint and a factual standpoint, at this point, the 212300 is binding on this board. In terms of the equipment that can be used at.
Okay, thank you. So those were the comments that I had for the board member comments. Are there any other comments from anyone else? No. I do have a question of you, Mr. Bruning. I note that on Wednesday, I believe it was, of last week, you attended GEMS training or EMS training?
EMS training?
Yes. Anything you'd like to share? It was an all-day affair as provided by the Secretary of State.
Something 70-year-old guys shouldn't try to do. It was a training session put on by the Secretary of State for staff. I was there as a board member. I did note that there were several other counties that have board members there, but the majority were staff, and it was in the nitty-gritty of how to conduct the electronic part of the election, and it was very good, very informative, and it is the system that we have is a complex system, and it takes a lot of care on the part of the staff to run the elections correctly. And I gained a whole lot of respect for those folks that have that deal with it in detail. So it was a good session. I would recommend it to anybody. They're conducting these all over the state, and this past week they conducted 5 here in Marietta, and it was a good session, but it's a long day, for sure. Thank you.
Well, thank you for attending and sharing the information, the electronic information, as well as this report. Does anyone else have any comments? Nope. There being none, Mr. White, I believe that there is a need to go into executive session for the purposes of discussing ongoing litigation.
Yes.
I will entertain a motion to move into executive session.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and properly seconded to move into executive session for the purposes of discussing litigation. All those in favor? The motion is unanimous, or passes unanimously.
And I'm going to take
A break. We'll entertain a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bruning. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. It's been moved and properly seconded to come out of executive session. All those in favor? The motion passes unanimously. And we just want to announce the next date of the next meeting will be, and of course I don't have my calendar in front of me, but as per usual, it is always the second Monday of the, is that the 11th? Oh my gosh, yes. September the 11th here at 3 p.m. And with that, our meeting is adjourned at 5:47 p.m. Thank everyone for their participation.